Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Developmental Screening and Surveillance Echo, brought to you by UT Health San Antonio in collaboration with the Texas Department of State Health Services. My name is Angela Riley, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. A few housekeeping items before we begin. To help with attendance, please enter your full name, affiliation, and email into the chat. Please remember to stay muted unless you are speaking. We encourage using the chat and or the raise your hand feature to pose questions and share perspectives throughout today's session. And as a note, these sessions are being recorded for later distribution. If you are having connection issues, please privately chat Karen, our Echo IT, for assistance. And just as a blanket statement for all here today, to ensure privacy, no personal health information is allowed at any point during the session. This includes any names, addresses, or birth dates, or other identifiable information. And let us always make every effort to avoid bias and stigmatizing terms so that we can continue having a space that is respectful and safe to learn. So with that, we'll move on to introductions. When I state your name, please unmute and introduce yourself. We'll start with Dr. Dorothy Mendel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dorothy Mendel. I'm an associate professor at UT Health Houston School of Public Health at the Austin campus.
Wonderful, thank you. Andrea Horton.
Hello, my name is Andrea Horton. I'm the Executive Director of Champions for Children here in Tyler, Texas.
Thanks, Andrea. And we have Faith Rivera.
Hi, everyone. Faith Rivera, the founder and principal consultant with Alo Civitas Consulting, actually joining you all from snowy Columbus, Ohio today.
Oh, goodness. I hope it's not too cold. And it's just so you all know, Faith will be our lead specialist today, so we'll be hearing more from her later on. Our case presenter for today, and actually our didactic presenter as well, Becky.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becky Swindoll. I am a child development specialist, and I work at Champions for Children in Tyler, Texas.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And please do continue the introductions here in the chat. We're so happy to see everyone and have a great full room today, virtual room today. So we'll go ahead and move on to our didactic presentation for today. Becky, you may take it away.
Okay, so my understanding is from this point, previously we were talking about developmental monitoring, correct? Okay, so we're going to move on to the next level, and I'm going to introduce developmental screening. So little short background about who I am. So I've been working in the early childhood industry since 1997, started off as an educator in the classroom. And it wasn't until about 3 years of teaching that I got a new curriculum that had developmental screening as part of that program. And so, of course, implementing all of the gamuts of that curriculum, I did that developmental screening. And it's one of those moments that forever changes who you are as an educator. And then you realize the impact that screening has on your teaching practices and the development of those children. It's not until you take just that one pause, that one moment when you meet a child to screen them, then that from that point forward directs how you teach them, how you engage with them, and identify what their needs are as an individual, and forever made me a better teacher. So that forever guided who I was as an educator. So then I became a director and made sure that all the teachers underneath my charge implemented those developmental screenings. And then as I moved in to become part of the Champions program, Andrea and I worked together and really have made developmental screenings a center point of the organization because we really identify the importance of this process. Okay, so next slide. So I have no financial conflicts or disclosures to announce. Do you want me to read this or?
You don't have to. This is a standard slide. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I definitely make all efforts not to stigmatize any of my language for sure. Because, and Andrea and I even had the conversation yesterday, when you say delayed or at risk, it's very sensitive topics, and so you always have to be very mindful of what language that we use, and it's always evolving. So you have to stay like in the know of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So what is a developmental screening? It is more formal than developmental monitoring, but not as formal as a formal evaluation. It's done less than developmental monitoring. So can anybody out there tell me, how often do we do developmental monitoring?
I would
So
say,
it,
I would
yeah, go
say
ahead.
daily.
Yeah,
You're
thanks, Kristen.
informally monitoring them daily if you're doing it
Yes.
right.
Exactly. So developmental monitoring is an informal, ongoing daily process. And then through that developmental monitoring, when there's something that kind of stands out, then that's what's going to trigger you to want to do that developmental screening. And so that's kind of just that daily interactions that you're having with the children. Now, above and beyond that, when you go to the doctor's appointments, you're going to have those formal developmental screenings at 9 months, 18 months, and 30 months. And then for autism, you're going to have them at 18 months and 24 months. Now, at a child care center, which is population that here, that we're talking about, it's really important that we conduct developmental screenings also within that environment. So ideally, you're going to do it on 4 different times. First time's upon enrollment. When a child gets enrolled into your child care center, first thing you should do is a developmental screening so you can identify what their needs are, where they are, and where you can go from there. And then from that point forward, every year when a class moves up into your classroom, first thing you should do is screen all the children. And now, one thing that people say is, how am I going to screen all these children? Right? It's possible. So you line them all up, you ask them to hop, and then you can see which 2 didn't, and then check that one, and then move your way through the list. And some of the other developmental screenings that are available, you send home to the parents, you have them fill out, and then come together to the table. So then you move on till around Christmas, first of the year, and you should screen again. Why? Because you're halfway through. You need to really take a moment to pause and assess, where have we grown? Where do we need to adjust our teaching practices for the rest of the year? And then at the end of the year, do a final screening before you move them up into the next classroom. So in a perfect world, this is where we want to try to set our goals within the early childhood classroom. Beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. Okay, so who can conduct these developmental screenings, right? You do need to be a trained professional. Like we said, it's a little bit more it's a validated tool that has been, it's got inter-rater reliability. And so you need to have a little bit of training in order to score the results of these screening tools. So doctors can do it, nurses can do it, early childhood educators, community professionals, or anybody in a school setting. So we conduct an annual survey here at Champions, and over the past couple of years, we've been asking early childhood educators, do you conduct developmental screenings? And you'd want to hear that they all are, but only 55% reported that they do. So that lets us know immediately that we've got room for growth. And I think the more that we talk about this, the more empowered we become as early childhood educators, that we are professionals. We're not babysitters. We do have knowledge, and we have a unique position where we can really engage with these parents and make a huge difference. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Because the goal is universal screening. So, and more people who are conducting these screenings, the more chance we get to catch catch the children. The ones that are extremely delayed are the ones who we see. So we've got to take the time to screen everybody to catch those gray children, because those are the ones that have the biggest impact if you can catch them early, or if they just need little interventions in order to set them along the right way. So when we catch them before they go to school, it takes way less effort to rewire than if you catch them within their first and second grade, which is the current kind of patterns that go on. So in the survey, the people who are conducting, so there's lots of different types of developmental screenings, and there's good ones and there's bad ones. And the most popular one that was reported among the educators who we surveyed was the ages and stages. So 67% of the caregivers reported that that's the screening tool that they use. Here in our local workforce board, Texas Rising Star, they provided all of the child care centers, and it's a very reliable tool. The second most reported developmental screening tool that was used was CLI, the Circle developmental screenings. So 33% reported using that. The second one was Frog Street. We've got lots of daycares who use the Frog Street curriculum, and within that is the AIM observation. So we had 24% reporting they were using that. And so some of the other tools that are out there is called Daisy 2 is one, MChat is another one, and Denver 2. So there are lots of different screening tools out there, and identifying the one that works best for your program and is user-friendly is what's important when you choose which screening tool to use. Okay, next slide. Okay, and so now I want to move in and talk about our CHIRP project. So we applied for funding a couple of years ago, and it's a community health initiated research partnership, and it's a feasibility study. And so our goal was, our research question was, can we partner with a community nonprofit to increase rates of developmental screening? And is this an effective and efficient process? We understand at Champions for Children that if you're a daycare director or a daycare teacher, that you are super busy, right? And it's hard to implement these. And so our goal was to see if we could step in as a nonprofit community provider to kind of just help facilitate, distribute, to increase rates of developmental screening. Okay, so next slide. So we partnered with 7 child care centers. We actually distributed 617 developmental screenings among 7 schools. And the age range was between 2 months and 5 years of age, which is what so we used the ASQ developmental screening tool. So that was the distribution screening tool that we used. And it goes from 2 months through 60 months. Next slide. So of those 617 that we distributed, we got 268 screenings returned, and our goal was to conduct 300, so we came pretty close to meeting our mark. We were excited to get 50% back, almost 50% back. It shows that a lot of times when you send things home to parents in a child care center, you never get it back. And so we were super excited that we were able to send the packets to the child care center. The child care center sent it home to the parents, and the parents returned it back, that we had such a phenomenal response rate. And what that communicated to us is that parents generally will have an understanding that there's something wrong with their child. And when given the opportunity to participate in these developmental screenings, they respond. So we were very happy with that result. So of those 268 screenings that were returned, 30% were identified for referral. Now, statistically across the nation, around 10 to 15% of children on average are what is normal. You know, it's normal for about 10 to 15% of children to be delayed. And why do we think our results were higher? Probably because the reason that they brought those results back is because they were already concerned. So that's going to skew our results a little bit higher to show higher rates of delay. We were able to get into contact with almost 50% of those parents. And so that was also a really good response rate, because we were an outside entity contacting them, and they answered the phone. And so that lets you know that they're excited to have somebody to talk to. You know, they're scared, they don't know what's going on, and they will pick up the phone to talk to a professional for guidance and support. Okay, next slide. So we had a really good even distribution, both male and female sex and across the racial demographics. So this aligns pretty close to what our region is. So we were really excited that we had a good distribution to give us a good snapshot of what's going on within our community. Okay, so we also, on above and beyond, on top of conducting the ASQ developmental screening, we sent home a survey to the parents. And one of the questions that we asked them was, do you currently have a primary care physician? And we were astounded to see that 99% of parents reported that they do have a primary care physician. And on top of that, 99% reported that they are going to their regularly scheduled well visits. But here's where it starts to get a little interesting and why I think our work is so important. Only 74% received that they were aware that they received a developmental screening at the well visit. Now, did they receive it? Did they not receive it? Are they not aware that they received it? That we don't know. Okay, next slide. Now, this is where my alarm bells went off when we were going through the data. So, of those parents who received the developmental screening, only 10% reported that they had a delay at their well visit. Now, if you look there where it says high-risk children, so those high-risk children were children that we identified with a delay, but only 40% of them said that it was identified at that child care at the doctor. So that to me communicates why it's so important that developmental screenings are not done just at the well visit, but by any agency, any caregiver, any professional that has the ability to conduct developmental screenings. We need to do them as frequently and as often as possible because to make sure they don't fall through the cracks, to catch those borderline children. Because if it's a borderline child or then it's with your 5 minutes with the doctor, it might just fall through. Where, and if you have a one-on-one conversation with a community provider or an early childhood educator, then we're going to have a slower, longer conversation with the parent and identify a problem that might just kind of go under the radar. So as you can see here, the area of delay identified at the doctor's office, 89% was communication. Fine motor was 8%, personal social was 4%. And so why is communication caught? Because it's an easy domain to identify, right? The harder domains to identify are going to be problem solving, personal social. And so, and those are crucial to identify in those first 3 years of life because the interventions that you need are going to have such a dynamic impact. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's what our screening results were. So these were our results from our project. So high risk were the children that were scored two standard deviations below cutoff. Moderate risk is 1 standard deviation below. So if the child is classified as high risk, then as a screener, the recommendation is to go directly to your primary care physician and start to work on receiving referrals. If a child is at moderate risk, then the recommendation is to provide that caregiver with specific activities that are tailored to really grow within that domain and then rescreen in 4 months. And so as you can see here, the number 1 category of delay was fine motor, followed by personal social, then communication, and then problem solving. And so the area within, and so next slide. And so as you can see here, fine motor, personal social, gross motor, and problem solving, there were twice as many children at risk than children at high risk. So why is this noteworthy? To me, this is very important because those children who are at moderate risk are those children that are not standing off the page as being delayed. But if we can identify them at 18 months and at 2 years of age and make these little shifts in our interactions and actions with these children, it sets them off on a completely different trajectory and they're never delayed. Whereas if they keep going and they keep going, and then this delay that they've had since they were 18 months is not identified until they're 8, then it becomes a high risk and something that might not be solvable. Whereas if we had found it 4 years earlier, then it could have set them on a completely different lifelong trajectory. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are the referrals. So if they were identified for, so we contacted them if they were scored 2 standard deviations below or if they had a parent concern. And so of those parents, we provided referrals to their primary care physician primarily, because anytime you do a developmental screening, the first thing you're going to say to them is take these results to your primary care physician. And so pretty much every child who you're going to screen and you find a delay, that's going to be the first place that you send them. And then they'll say, well, I did a well visit at my primary care physician. And you say, yes, I know you did. Take this piece of paper with you to the doctor. And then that provides the information that the doctor needs to fast track them onto the referral process that they need. So the second most common referral that we provided was to ECI and early special education services, and followed up by community agency referral, which would be like Champions for Children for autism awareness or hearing, vision, and behavioral screening. Next slide. So at the 4-month follow-up, 67% of the parents who received a referral actually followed through with the referral. And so that was an exciting part for me for this research project as well, is that parents care and parents will follow through and provided the assistance that they need. Now, 20% of the parents throughout this project reported they received the activity sheet. So that was kind of a fail in our project because the activity sheet is part of Ages and Stages. And so the whole goal is you fill out the ASQ and then you do the activity sheet. So that was kind of like a disconnect that we had within our particular research project. And so in the future, I think that's something that we would really highlight a little bit more, how important that activity sheet is, because that's the second component of Ages and Stages. But of the parents who did get the activity sheet, 75% of them said they did the activities on there, right? And so it's like, if we can get the information to them, they will do it. So 85, and then changes in development. So 83% of the children who we screened and we identified with a delay reported that their development improved 4 months later. 12% said no change. And then unfortunately, 5% that said that they regressed. Okay, next slide. So the next question that we asked them was, if their development improved, what do they think made the difference? 31% said working with their child. One parent in particular said, I had no idea that simply playing on the floor with my child would have such a huge impact on the development of them. And that's the most important thing about doing these developmental screenings, is it's not just catching those children who are delayed, it's catching those children in that gray zone that you can do something so simple as rolling the ball back and forth or shaking a rattle in their face is going to completely rewire them and set them on a different trajectory. Now, 26% said it was just part of normal growth and development, but 23% said it was the therapy that they received due to the referral, and 20% raised the roof, because I'm an early childhood educator, said it was their child care facility that helped them to grow and develop. And that to me is the warm fuzzies that we need, because I think too many times in this industry, we don't get pats on the back. And right there, that was a parent's report saying that thanks to my child's facility, that is responsible for the growth and development of my child. Next slide. Okay, and so this kind of shows the before, pre, post. So 4 months later, we rescreened children who were delayed. And so within the area of gross motor, 70% had the most improvement, followed by problem solving, 52% in communication, and then personal, social, and fine motor. So at least we had almost 50% or above of the people who interacted in our program improved. And the area where we really want to pay attention to is the regression percentages. And so the great thing, and that's why you need to do beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, right? And so in that middle of the year is when you're going to get these results. And then you can say, okay, you've regressed in fine motor. So instead of going to the, dramatic play center, I know you love playing in the dramatic play center. We've got to really encourage you to come over here to the manipulative center and play with these pegs, in order to really develop those fine motors. And so that right there is where it demonstrates how it can guide your teaching practices by doing multiple developmental screenings. We can't just do it at 9 months, 18 months, 24 months. We've got to do it every few months to really track their development. Okay, next slide. All right, I think that's it,
Yes.
actually. So, and I think I did pretty good, 125.
That was excellent, Becky. Thank you so much. Thank you for your wonderful presentation on developmental screening. In the interest of time, we encourage you to use the chat and share your questions and comments for Becky. There are some that I do encourage you, Becky, to look at. There was some really great feedback and questions here. Not feedback, praises for you and your presentation. So please check that out and use the chat, and she will be able to address any questions and comments there. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to some announcements. Karen, when you get a chance, can you please share the announcement slides? Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. So please don't forget to claim credit using your TechPeds account and scanning the QR code on the screen, or you may also use the link in the chat for that. Next slide, please. Are you interested in presenting a case? Cases can describe a challenge that you are presently facing with a child in your care. Challenges could be around screening or interventions or referrals, anything like that. And as a case presenter, you do not have to prepare a formal presentation. We will provide you with the tools you need to do that. So if you are interested in presenting a case, please use the link in the chat to do so. Next slide, please. Join us at the next ECHO in the new year on Friday, January 10th. We'll have Alexandra Milius present. Next slide, please. Awesome. So today, we will be trying something new and exciting. Our case discussion will have a slightly different format. After the case presentation, which will happen after announcements, we will move to breakout rooms for the case discussion. And so we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes in smaller groups to discuss the case, after which we will move back to the main session, and a representative from each breakout room will share a summary of what was discussed. So in about a minute, we want a summary on what the smaller groups talked about. And so just please remember to assign a group representative once you all are in your smaller groups, and be on the lookout for a message from Karen, our IT, for the breakout rooms closing. So that is what our discussion for today will look like. So thank you, Karen, for sharing these announcement slides. Awesome. And so before we do move on to our case today, I would like to remind everyone again that no protected health information is allowed in either the chat or the discussion. And let's continue making this a wonderful space that's inclusive and open to respectful dialogue. So with that, Becky, once Karen shares the slides for you, please walk us through this case. Thank you.
Okay, so I really wanted to share. We had so many stories and wonderful insights from the referral process that we went through with CHIRP. And we had our registered nurse here. She was responsible for providing those referrals. And every time she talked, she would come in and tell me the amazing conversation that she had with that mother. And so this particular story has to do with a 60-month male. And the mother completed the ASQ3 questionnaire. So it was 60 months old. The areas of high risk that were identified within this particular child was 3 domains. So communication, fine motor, and personal social. And then for gross motor, the child was also identified at a moderate risk for delay. And then the parental concern report of having possible ADHD. Now, the way that the ASQ developmental screening works is that if a parent reports a concern, it supersedes all results. And then you go off of the parent concern. And so within this particular case, we had 3 domains delayed, one domain possibly delayed, and then also parental concern. So the interesting thing about this particular mother is that she had high concerns, and she was actually told by her doctor that her child was okay. And so that, I think, is why. So you can go ahead to go to the next slide. Okay, and so when we had the conversation with the mother, the first thing that she said was, but my primary care physician told me that my child was okay. And so when you're a screener and then you're told that, right? How do you respond to that? It's like, what do you say back to that parent? And so, and then the next thing that she said, and so now you guys are going to break out into the individual break rooms so that you can kind of talk about things, right? Okay. So the next thing that the mom said to us was, well, but I don't have insurance right now. Right. And so anytime you need to be prepared for these concerns, because the concern is not always, I think there's something wrong with my child, but the next concern might be, okay, well, now I know there's something wrong with my child. Where do I go next? What do I do next? And so I know that you guys will continue to develop that through your program. So, and then the mom finally, her third thing that she stated was that she is concerned. She knew that she was concerned, and that she just what she said was, I know there's something wrong with my child, and I just really don't want him to be delayed. But my doctor told me he's fine, but I know he's not. Right. And so then she filled out this ASQ, and then now you have these results, right? But that empowers you as a parent, right? I have a concrete screening result that I can go back to my doctor with and say, here, help me.
Excellent. Thank you, Becky. So with that, everyone, we will give Karen a minute to go ahead and assign us to our breakout rooms, and we will discuss this case and regroup in about 15 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Just giving a couple more seconds to our other folks. I think everyone is back now. Yes. Okay, wonderful. So thank you all. We hope that was a great experience to kind of have smaller groups to chat. So I'll go ahead and start. If our representative from group room 1 could unmute and give us a brief minute or two of summary of their discussion.
Was I group 1?
I have no idea what group I was in.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Did you know who the leader of the groups were? Because we forgot to look at our room number.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
No worries. Dr. Mendel, kick us off with this great this part of the session. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. We had a great discussion about conflicting information and how hard that is as a parent when you're receiving conflicting information. And one of those pieces like goes with your gut, but it's not something you want to admit or accept. It's hard to accept. And another piece is like somebody who like is high up in the hierarchy of knowledge and is telling you something else. And navigating that and trying to come to terms with that is difficult. The other thing that we talked about is the difficulty of discovering delays in a child this old who's not in school yet, completely not eligible for ECI anymore, and is on this verge of going into school, but you want to get in services before they get into school. And that is a really hard situation to be in. And the other thing that I tried to lead with and I got cut off is I want to emphasize that childcare can do something about this. You don't have to wait for services. And there are things, additional training, and I love that this was brought up of like, I'm going to go, if this was a kid in my care, I would go read more. I would try training. I would try to find to bring in other activities to do with this child and recognize that those things as a child care, you guys are completely empowered to do that, and it's wonderful, and it can make a huge difference. Because I do want to emphasize childcare often sees kids more than parents. So you guys are with kids more than parents are with kids during their waking hours. So that's us.
Awesome. Thank you, Group 2. Just figured out you were in Group 2, by the way, Dr. Mendel. So we'll go ahead and go to the group that was with Andrea, and I was just informed that Patricia was the selected representative. So please, Patricia, unmute and tell us what your group talked about.
Group 2, okay. We similar conversation, but sort of the basis was to really support the parent and really encourage that parent that they are the expert about their child. So not to be stifled by a report from a physician, but also to walk that line and not alienate physicians. So we want to let the parent know it's a screener. It's not an in-depth assessment. So that I'm sure that the physician would welcome additional information. The scenario of the child being 5 was a little harder because I was ready to go in. If the child was within ECI, we could just really bring in that whole team for support. We could do the additional information and provide it. But age 5 is a little trickier. So we talked about other community resources, and one of our members talked about the local health authorities so that we can kind of deal with the social emotional concern. And then there's safety net clinics within the community that can perhaps guide that parent and support that no insurance scenario. But continuing and not only empowering the parent, but empowering, I think, like was Dr. Mendel just said, is the child care. So the child care center itself can leverage their expertise with physicians and that parent to take it to the next level for further assessment. Group, did I nail it? Did I?
I wasn't there, but I would say so. That was a wonderful summary. Thank you, Patricia. And so last but certainly not least, we will move on to Faith. I was in Faith's group. So Faith, if you could give our group summary, and then I will, or you can take it away and go straight into the final summary of all the summaries. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. So our group, some of the points that were mentioned that the other groups may not have mentioned, was really making sure that we engage the school district. So because this child should hopefully soon be transitioning to kindergarten, getting that school district involved. And even though that process can take a long time, starting to engage the school now and supporting the family still through the process. Kind of that both and of getting them connected to service and also supporting them in the interim. And then making sure that the family is connected to other resources in the community, like potentially home visiting, getting them connected with organizations like Texas Disability Rights so that they know that what their rights are as parents, not only in the waiting period, but also as this student could potentially or this child could potentially get services through the district. And helping parents really just to remember that they know their child best and to help empower them in that scenario. So I guess I'll go into the overall summaries and takeaways from today. So we had a lot of wonderful discussion and information shared, sharing really that it's not just one organization or type of provider's role to screen children, but that it's on all of us, the home visiting programs, the childcare centers, and pediatricians to ensure that we are impacting children and their families, helping to educate and support the parents in not only understanding what their child should be doing developmentally, but helping give them the tools and the resources to support their child's development outside of the child care center and outside of their programs. The more eyes that we can have on children and screen them universally, the better. And then really ensuring that we're building that wraparound support around parents in their education and advocacy to support their children as they receive the services that they need.
Excellent. Thank you, Faith. And thank you all for your flexibility on trying out a new format for our Echo session. And our case discussion in particular, your summaries were really wonderful, and we do hope that you found those smaller groups to be beneficial and conducive to more conversation and resource sharing and knowledge sharing. So that's wonderful. So with that, thank you to everyone that has attended today's session, and not only today's session, all the other sessions we've had. As a reminder, please complete the session survey using the link in the chat. If you would like to present a case at a future session, which we do encourage and are always open to and welcome, please email Echo Admin for more information and assistance with that. And we look forward to seeing everyone in the new year for the first session on January 10th. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful holiday season.